Welcome to the Freelance Journalism Podcast. I'm Katherine Reynolds Lewis, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Tyler Huckabee. Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Tyler Huckabee is the managing editor of Sojo.net. He's originally from the Great Plains, but now lives in Nashville with his wife. Much of his writing has centered on the intersection of faith, justice, and pop culture, which he has written about for the Washington Post, The Week, Religion News Service, and of course, Sojourners. So, can you start by just sharing a brief overview of your career in journalism and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. Well, like you said, I'm from the Great Plains. I'm from rural Nebraska. That's where I grew up. But then moved to Chicago for college, where I studied religion. And after graduating from there, there's not that many things you can do with a religion degree in Chicago. And since I didn't feel a call to the clergy or anything like that. Instead, I just started writing a little bit and started pitching here and there. At that time, this was around 2008, 2009, when I first started pitching different places, mostly at that time doing music writing, like album reviews, film reviews in Chicago at that time, especially with organizations like the AV Club and Chicago
Mm-hmm.
Reader. They're still around, but obviously not quite the same as they used to be under very different management now than they were then. But that was a big part of that city's freelance scene. So managed to get a few bylines there when I was working on all that. And then shortly after I did that, Relevant Magazine, which is a religion and pop culture publication based in Florida, gave me a call and asked me to come to join them as a web editor, which I did at the time, was there for
Mm-hmm.
about 10 years, then went back to the freelance life for a little bit around COVID era, which I did then for 3 or 4 years before just this year. Sojourners, which I was really enjoying freelancing. It felt kind of, freelancing is always a little bit fun and a little bit terrible, and
Yes.
that's why we love it. And I was enjoying the little bit fun, little bit terrible part of it. But then Sojourners, which is an organization I've admired for a long time, gave me a call, and I'd always said if they were interested in bringing me on, then I would be interested in that. So I did, and that's where I've been now for about 6 months.
So interesting. Actually mirrors my career. I got a useless degree in physics, nothing to do with journalism,
Exactly.
and started off writing book and movie reviews. That was my sort of first
Uh-huh.
side hustle.
I hope that still happens. It's such a great introduction into
Yeah.
that world, and I know it's not quite as easy to make a dent in the review criticism space, pop culture criticism space as it used to be. But it was you learn a lot in a very short amount of time doing that kind of work, even if you just do it for your own Substack or
Right.
whatever.
For
It
sure.
was very helpful for me.
Yeah, well, we also talk about a lot at the IAJ of getting your reps in and sort of just the powering through
Uh,
lots and lots of content is how you get
yeah,
good at your craft.
yeah.
So talk about, and I love always interviewing editors who have been freelance because you understand so much more this side of the interaction. Can you talk about what you're looking for at Sojo.net in particular? What kind of stories you commission or multimedia, or what pitches you're looking for?
Yeah, sure. So Sojourners is a pretty old organization, actually. We've been around for about 50 years, a little over 50 years at this point. It started out in DC as sort of an intentional living, kind of like hippy dippy but Christian community. At that time in the 60s has evolved a little bit over time. Now there's sort of two wings of it. One is a mobilization and activism organization that's very involved down on Capitol Hill, organizing protests and working with other nonprofits for justice causes both in DC and around the country. And then we have the editorial wing, which is where I work, which reports on social justice issues, especially where social justice and faith intersect is really our sweet spot. We are a largely Christian organization. That does not mean that everybody who works for us is a Christian, because they are not, or that everybody who writes for us or is interviewed by us or promoted by us is a Christian, because they're certainly not. But that is the perspective we tend to bring to the issues. We are aware that Christianity has a certain political flavor in the country right now. And we try to be pretty deliberately and actively a counter narrative to the mainstream understanding of what Christianity is and how it operates. We are very transparent about that. That is, transparency is important to us. In our mind, transparency and objectivity are two different things. We are aware that we are not always entirely objective around faith issues because we don't think, given the nature of our organization, that objectivity is really possible, or is even would help us, would be a useful trait for us. But we will be transparent, and you will be aware of where we're coming from, and we can be very, very clear about that. So within that realm, there's a lot of opportunity. There's religion is a very, very big and important issue in the country right now, and especially when it comes to things like Christian nationalism in the White House, and that's something that we really try to very actively report the ways that it is being foisted upon us in different realms of American life, and to shine a light on the people who are pushing back against it, where how that struggle is going, and who is taking that on. So if you have any stories in that realm, that is very interesting to us. Always interested in hearing from stories about faith from marginalized communities, places that aren't always accepted, have not historically been accepted in the church. This, of course, people of color is a very obvious one. People from the LGBTQ community, we love hearing those stories as well. So if you've got something either about a community that is doing that, if you have a personal reflection on that is interesting, if you're doing something interesting and artistically or creatively, we do love culture. We believe that's an important part of activism work. So we love hearing those stories as well. Once you since have such a narrow focus as an organization, sometimes I feel like every problem starts to look like a nail because all we have is a hammer. So whenever somebody comes to me with a story, I'm like, I can kind of see a religion angle in here somewhere if I squint a little bit. So all I ask is that our people who want to freelance for us be as creative as we try to be in finding how does faith factor in to this story. Where is faith? And once you start looking, it's usually not too hard to find.
And when you think about the stories that you accept versus what you maybe produce in-house,
Mhm.
what's the percentage and sort of how many freelance pieces do you commission in a week or a month?
So right now we are doing we largely have I have at this moment we have all in-house editors, and we do not have any in-house writers. That doesn't mean we don't do some writing every now and then. We all do, and the team of editors we have are all excellent writers, of course. But we really do prefer to accept freelance pitch. So on a week-to-week basis, I would say I'm probably accepting usually 4 to 5 pieces a week, and that is going to typically be probably close to about of our publishing calendar. So we're pretty open on that point. I think we have a very good editorial process that we put people through, and I think the reason that we try to freelance out so much is we try to be very humble about our own perspectives and be very mindful of how many different viewpoints are out there that we don't have in house. And one of the things that I love about my job is being able to find and champion some of those other viewpoints when they come to us.
Amazing. And when you think about, you get something in your inbox and you're like, oh, this is a great Sojourner story. What does that ideal pitch look like?
Mhm.
How would you describe
Oh,
it?
good question. Um, I think that I am right now very I find I'm very I'm looking for stories of specificity. I get a lot of pitches, which I'm not trying to dismiss or besmirch anybody's experience, but whenever somebody says, "Well, I want to write about the experience of being an immigrant in the church right now," and that's very important. That's an important story, and this time in particular, obviously, I want to champion those stories. But I need a little more. I need to know, like, what about that experience? I want to know. That is a huge, topic to take
Right.
on. There's a lot going on there. So I would prefer something that's a little more narrow, that has a little more of an actual argument. What about being a immigrant in the church right now are you specifically interested in? What about being a queer Christian who is still trying to make their faith work. Are you? I want more than just, I want to kind of profile myself. I want to hear
Right.
about what has helped you there. Has there been some sort of music that's been an important part of that? Have you met a community that's actually made it easier for you to integrate your identity and your spiritual practice and your justice work? And so the things like that, I think something that a lot of people, when they see an organization like ours, they start thinking very, very broadly because faith is such a huge and difficult to write about topic. And what I find myself challenging the people who pitch me over again and again to do is narrow the scope a little bit. Like
Right.
pick you're at 5,000 feet. Let's come down to 500 feet and see
Right.
what we find there.
Great. And what is the range of story lengths or sort of scope of projects that you're commissioning?
I'm looking for the website, which is as managing editor is my primary focus. I'm looking for usually about 1,000 to 1,500 words. We're pretty flexible at Sojourners. If you have a story that you just like, I tried to get it under 1,500, but it just needs 2,000. I am not one of those editors who gets super picky or finicky about that. You take the time you need to take. If it starts getting too long, then I often will recommend, why don't you go talk to our friends over at the Print Magazine, where the lengths tend to be a little bit longer, more in the 2,500 to 3,500 range.
Got it. And for a web article, 1,000 to 1,500 words, how long would you want the pitch to be? Like a tight paragraph or something longer?
I do like a tight paragraph, longer pitches. It sounds so mean, but I do get so many, so I really do need to, like it's very very helpful for me and for most editors that I know to be able to get to all right, what's this about? How long do you think it's going to be? When can you have it over to me? Like I'm looking for some pretty. If you can get your pitch, the actual meat of the story to me in 2 or 3 sentences, and then just give me some real basics about if you're how many sources are we talking about here that you're going to need to interview, how long are you thinking it's going to need to be, and how fast do you think you can turn it around. Those are the things that are really going to help me. I rarely and all of us at Sojourners, we rarely make decisions alone. We usually bring the pitch that we're interested in to the rest of the team. So if I have those details, that makes those conversations quite a bit easier because those are the things we're talking about in house.
Got it. And of course, we have to talk about money. Can you talk about your pay range or the pay for different kinds of
Yeah,
projects?
of course. For the website, it can really run a pretty huge gamut depending on what kind of things we're talking about here. Um, for like an opinion piece, we're usually looking at something like 150 to $250, something like that. For a reported story, where you're actually going out to talking to sources, getting some news, then we're looking at more like probably at the 300 to $400 range. And then once we get to longer like feature, like stuff that would actually go into the magazine, it starts to go up a little bit from there because we assume you're talking to more people and it's going to be a little bit longer. And then culture pieces, if we're talking about something like a review or like film analysis, book analysis, album review, something like that, then that's a little bit more like 150-ish to $180, somewhere in there. There's a lot of different factors that go into it, obviously, but that's the broad
Okay,
overview.
awesome. And when you talk about, a piece that maybe was your own perspective, your own experience, would you consider that like an opinion piece would that fall into
Yes.
that? Yeah. Okay, great.
Yep, that would be an opinion piece.
We
And we
also,
can there's such thing as reported opinion. Obviously, that does happen. So that just kind of throws it into I wish there was more of a science to it, but it does, we make a judgment call in there. And I'm always very happy, obviously, to negotiate with writers. And if we pitch you something that seems a little too low, then I am not, at least as an editor, I do not get turned off by someone who says, actually, I was thinking it would be more like this. I find that usually to be, whether or not I can do it, I always appreciate people who stand up for themselves and try to get the money they deserve.
awesome. And do you pay on submission or acceptance of the piece or
We pay on
publication?
publication.
Got it. Do you have kill fees if something changes and you can't use
We
it?
do have kill fees if something changes. pride myself on trying to never do it. If I really, really, I respect freelancers, and I know it sucks to get a kill fee. So I don't think, if I remember correctly, I have not done it in my tenure yet at Sojourners in 6 months, and I'm sure it'll happen at some point. But we do, we if something changes, then we will get the kill fee. Yes.
And do you know the percentage? Is it like 25 or 50 or?
For us, it is 50,
Okay, awesome. I also have to get in the nitty-gritty with copyright terms and the
of course.
contract because we always like to know your copyright license terms, if you have derivative rights, and if you have an indemnification clause.
The yes, although we try to be very, I want people to retain as much of their rights as possible. Obviously, when you write for us, we do retain the rights to that piece to use it again in perpetuity. But for we've been able to, and it's always been very exciting when it happens. If somebody is able to talk to a publisher about expanding a piece they did for us into a book, or I don't think that's happened for a film yet, to my knowledge, but there's going to be a first time for everything. Then we would always be, we've always been very, very free and able to work with that as long as there's some sort of this, we just want to line a little bit of credit in there, but we don't expect to retain any sort of money or anything like that if that were to come your way.
Awesome. And I think from talking beforehand that you don't have an indemnification clause.
That
I
is
know you
correct.
asked. Yeah, perfect. Can you give any examples of a freelance pitch, especially if it was someone who was new to you or new to the magazine, that really well worked well for you? And just talk a bit about why did it resonate well? Why was this a great Sojourners piece?
Good question. Let's see. I'm going to think back. Um, But I want to be careful here too, because the first one that came to mind hasn't been published yet, and I don't want to give anything. I don't want to give anything away just yet. So I had a friend, well, a friend now, because they live here in Nashville. So when they first reached out to us, I suggested we meet up, and we did, and we had a nice chat. But when she first reached out, she brought my attention sort of an influencer, Instagram type person who I was not familiar with, who is having some interesting conversations, and one of those influencers who's gotten big overseas but hasn't really hit the States yet, a person who's based in the UK, who is a lesbian and is having interesting conversations around faith just
Mm,
there on her own channel. And that's the sort of thing that's like, that's interesting, that makes sense, that's in the like, and I have, like a lot of people my age, when I hear the word influencer, something in me is a little like, oh, I don't like that. Like I get a little, I get a little weirded out by it. But if you can make the case that they're influential because they have interesting things to say, then I'm very inclined to get. And in this case, this is a weird corner of our lane that I hadn't heard about yet. And this person seems like they're on the verge of becoming kind of an interesting thing, but is not already like huge, but
mm,
is also like, they're growing. Something is
mm.
happening. There's clearly energy around this thing that they're doing. That's I like, as an editor, I like catching waves right at the beginning of their crest,
Right.
and so if you can do that, that's a real sweet spot for me. And they were able to approach it. The person who pitched this is was pitching it as a person who is transgender, so they're able to bring their own interesting perspective to that as well. That just sounds like a way more interesting conversation than like me, a cisgender guy, having this conversation. Well, I want to hear what you two. There'd be a lot more freedom and interest there, I think, around that conversation. So that was a
Awesome.
good one. I liked that one a lot. That felt really good. We recently published a piece by a now former professor at Columbia critiquing the institution that she was working for some of their capitulation to the White House following the protests of the students over the situation in Gaza. That's a no-brainer for me. That's somebody who's saying something that's really important, standing up to their institution, saying something that they feel like they need to be said. It takes courage to say something like that. So if you can find, I think stories of courage are something that are very appealing to everybody right now. We
Yeah.
all like reading a little bit about courage. So that was the easy one for me as well.
Okay, for sure. Um, So on the, you probably know from being freelance for many years that we can get superstitious about pitching, and we do like to get any granular practical advice on like what to put in the subject line, or what you have to include in the pitch, or even just is there a better day of the week when you are more open or you're looking for
Mhm,
ideas?
mhm. I'll try to I'll think about the granular things that I definitely notice. I definitely notice the subject line needs to be more than just pitching you a story about church. Like I do need, like, if you can give me some really emotional words in the headline, then I'm at least, I really try to, and I feel like I'm going to say this on the record, and somebody out there's going to be like, well, he never got back to me, which I'm sure is true. I'm sure I've dropped the ball. I do try to read every pitch that I get and send a response to it, as long as it's not written by AI. If I get the sense it's written
Yes.
by AI, I do not respond to those. But if it's, I can tell it came from a human person, then I do try to at least give you a, even if it's short, a no. But I'm going to be more interested if I see some big emotional words in the title that aren't just fluffy, but
Mm,
that give me a sense of, all right, what's the angle, what's the specifics, what's the point of view. That's all very, very helpful for me. Like we said earlier, short 2 or 3 sentences to get you right into it. It is helpful to know. I think probably mostly know this if you're in the freelance game at all, but I do think sometimes you see, especially younger, newer freelancers don't always do this. It's helpful to know what your experience is, whether it's education, whether it's other places that you've written for before, even if it's just on Substack, or even if it's just,
hmm.
I've got a Twitter with 5,000 followers. Well, that's 5,000 is good for you. That's something. You got something going on there. I think a lot of people don't do that because they're worried they don't have anything that's all that interesting. But even that's useful information for me. It doesn't, in my case at least, it doesn't mean that's not a no. Like, so you haven't written anywhere before. I was there too, and I owe so much of my career to people who gave me a shot when I didn't have much of a resume. So I do try to turn that around as much as possible and pay that forward. That's very helpful. Um, I never mind when people just attach like, and here's a draft. I already got it ready. Take a look. I know some people get kind of superstitious or weird about that, and there are definitely reasons to not do that. And I don't begrudge anybody not wanting to do it. I would recommend that you save it, or you just know, like, I have a draft ready to go. If you want to see it, like, make that a follow up. I think that's smart practice.
Got it.
Um, let's see other things that are helpful. Because I work for the web and I'm not currently involved in print magazine, because I work for the web, we do work on very, very short turnaround times. We are trying to chase fast moving news stories. This administration moves quite quickly. So what is a big story one day is not going to be a big story the next. So it really is helpful if I know that you can get the story is either done and ready to go, or that you can have it there in 24 to 48 hours. That's me for the web. Now, it's not going to be, if you're pitching a print magazine, it's going to be a little different by necessity, and that's great. But I am thinking usually, if someone says I can have it ready in 2 to 3 weeks, I'm usually, not always, but usually like, I don't have 2 or 3 weeks for this. So
Right.
can we think more in terms of 5 days, 6 days, something like that?
Got it. That's really helpful to know. And that was what I was going to ask is like, what is the editing timeline and process? Is it just the writer and you, or are there other steps to it before publication?
So our process is I try to keep it, it doesn't always happen, but I try to keep it to one round of feedback. So I will send it back with notes, and that's how most of the editors that I work with on our team do it as well. And barring any major issues with that, that's one round is usually enough for us. And then we will do another lighter round just to get it like cleaned up. Then our process is then to pass it over to a fact checker, and we do the fact checking on that one. That may, depending, involve one more round. We may have to reach back out to you and be like, hey, actually, this, where'd you find this? Is this, and 9 times out of 10, that's very easy, but we may have to reach out one more time. Then we put it into a copy edit, and our copy editor takes it, and then it's off to load it in the back end and get it published. The
Okay,
whole
nice.
thing, ideally, I love for all of that to happen over the course of 2 or 3 days, because that just makes everything smooth and gives everybody time to do their job. But in a pinch, we've been known to turn things around in 4 or 5 hours if we have to. So it does happen, but that also, the faster you move, the more likely there are mistakes, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, got it. And with the fact check, how what do you prefer for freelancers to provide to facilitate fact checking? Do you want like an annotated document? Do you want to see notes or see transcripts, or are your fact checkers pretty independent?
I are so I including hyperlinks I think is a good practice. Including hyperlinks from well-vetted institutions is also that is something that I do look for pretty closely. If the document that you send over is linking to places that don't seem super to me, that seem a little iffy, then I start to get nervous about where does this person get their information from. But hopefully most freelancers know that. I do appreciate links to everything. If you, I do not need transcripts. That's not something that we worry about at Sojourners. I know there's places that do. We will ask for them if we need to, and we have done that before. But I normally don't. I do ask, and this is sort of a new policy for us, but I do ask if you use AI for anything like translation, which a lot of people do. And I have a lot of issues with AI and writing generally, but excuse me, but I do not mind if you use it for like foreign language translation. I think that's a helpful thing that it can do. I don't have a problem with that, but I do ask that people note that AI was used for this part of it. And if AI is used anywhere in it, then we will verify it with an actual, we'll find somebody who can speak that language or something and make sure double check that it's correct. And then we have a team of fact checkers who's very, very good, a team of two. They're both very, very smart, and they will come back with questions often, like reach out to the author for that, but I don't necessarily expect them to send me all the sources in advance. I don't ask for that.
Okay, wonderful. That's really thoughtful. I also have noticed there's more sort of variety of standards for reporting and editing, or I'm sorry, reporting and interviewing. And some people do email interviews, and that's fine. So other editors are like, no, unless it came out of someone's mouth, you shouldn't put it in quotes. I've even heard of like interviews over an Instagram DM. So, what are your expectations, and what would you like freelancers to tell you in terms of the interviewing and reporting process?
It goes in terms of preference for me. I obviously, and like a call like we're having right now is the preferred one. If you can't be in person, then I do prefer a phone call or ideally a Zoom call. That's to me the safest. If you have, I'm not above email interviews, but we will note that it was an email interview in the piece if that's the case. Social media, I'm trying to think if I've ever quoted somebody from the DMs. I don't think so. I don't think so. But I wouldn't be opposed to that, but I would want to vet that pretty carefully if somebody told me that's where they got their information from.
Right. Make sure it's actually that person's account.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's because we do, a lot of people prefer to, an email interview is often easier, and I understand that. And sometimes it's just necessary to if somebody you want to talk to is on a plane or they're on a different part of the world, and so morning is night for that. Like there's reasons why email might be necessary. But I do think it's important that for us as Sojourners, especially transparent, the trust of our readers is everything, and transparency is extremely important to us. So we try to be as really upfront about stuff like that as we have to be. So we will note it, and if it's not clear from the piece that freelancer sends us how this conversation was obtained, then I will reach out and ask them to clarify that, and we will put it in the piece.
And on the same vein, calling back to your thoughts about objectivity and transparency, what expectations, if any, do you have around your freelancers, opinions on social media or their political stance, or, there's such a variety of practices among different media outlets. Where do you fall on that question?
We're pretty libertarian on that front. I do not. It doesn't scare me that people. I think social media sort of lends itself to you just shooting your mouth. You're like waiting in line for coffee, and you're like, I'm so mad at my mayor right now, and you post something about. I think if somebody would, it's not something that I don't check somebody's social media for stuff like that before publishing pieces from them. I my team, the team at Sojourners, editorial team, we try to be fairly careful about where we're. But again, we are pretty transparent about the positions that we come from and the organization that we work for. So I don't think we're not quite as. You wouldn't get in trouble for saying certain policy made you mad. Now, if you started like swearing at somebody over and over again on social media or going and getting into the DMs, that would be a different story. But I don't think we've had that issue yet.
Okay, great.
So that I know a lot of places do care about that, and I think if you're a freelancer, you should probably be mindful of that. That will be something that is likely to impact positively or negatively your career. Social media is a branding tool for you. So I think there are definitely places where if you've been very forceful in your politics, that is going to be taken into account. Our place isn't necessarily one of them, but some places for sure will be.
Right, right. And a lot of freelancers now make money from non-journalism work.
Mhm.
Do you have concerns about conflicts of interest? What would you want a freelancer to disclose to you? And are there sort of bright lines where you're like, oh no, I'm sorry, we can't take journalistic work from you?
Yeah, that is a little more of a something that we are pretty mindful of. I do conflict of interest is something that's important to me, and I want to make sure that if you're reporting on something, an organization, a movement, a community, a creative project, that you are not connected in any way to anyone who's been involved in that. That would be a no from me if we were to find out that not that it's not interesting. Something that's happened a few times is somebody's pitched us on something and we found out they're kind of friends with the writer or the filmmaker or whatever, and we'd be like, hey, this isn't going to work for me, but this is a cool project and we would still like to cover it. We're just going to need somebody else to do it. That's happened, and they've in the case where it has, they've always been very gracious about it. So I do think that's something to be mindful of. I think that I don't like access journalism. I don't like the idea that because somebody who does writing, that gives you special access to these organizations. That I think that drives a lot of people crazy. That's why a lot of people don't have trust in different journalism media outlets, because they see that happening and it drives them nuts. And I think they're totally justified in feeling like it drives them nuts. So I try to be pretty mindful of that.
Awesome. And if you're a new freelancer who really wants to pitch you, maybe you don't have a ton of experience, what would you say is the type of story or the, easiest way to get your foot in the door? Is it something that's like newsy and timely, or maybe just something quirky that you haven't seen before that you can take a little more time to get to know the writer?
Those are all good. Yeah, I think that if you are just getting your foot in the door and you have something new, I would say either depends on kind of what sort of writing you want to do. If you want to be a journalist, if you want to be doing actual reporting, then it can be very helpful for me for you to say, like, here's something kind of interesting happening in my corner of the world. We're based in DC. I live in Nashville. But I want to be able to cover everything that's going on in the country. So if you've got something that's really interesting, especially something that's kind of, I think I'm not just looking for good news. Like, there's an organization in my home that takes in homeless cats. Like, that's nice, but it's not really a story. But if you've got a cool local journalism story that you think could have lessons for the
Mm,
broader community of activists, of people of faith, stuff that falls into our lane, that to me is very interesting. So that is really helpful. And I love publishing those stories, especially if you can draw the parallels between here's why what's working for this community here in Phoenix, Arizona, or whatever, might be worth other places around the country paying attention to and mimicking. I like that stuff a lot. If you are more of a culture writer, we do a lot of I like culture writing. That's where I got my start as culture writing. So I still always have a soft spot for culture writers. If you have an interesting take on a big, like I love publishing somebody who can say something about a film, album, a book that nobody else is saying because of their own personal experience with it or how it hit. I was thrilled to be able to publish a piece on. We had this new Superman movie. Everyone was writing about
yeah.
Superman, obviously, which is great. And there's Lois Lane's a reporter, so we've got a lot of I'm always supporting her. So being able to publish a piece by an immigrant about Superman because there's an immigration narrative in there. That's cool. I like that. I like that we can give like everybody's talking about this, but here's a perspective on it you may not have thought of before,
Love
and
it.
so that stuff is really cool.
Yeah, great. Often we're trying to get ideas out there to lots of places. We don't know where it's going to land. Are you okay with simultaneous submission, or would you rather have someone give it to you exclusively since you're moving so quickly?
I'm fine with simultaneous. I do. It's helpful to know to be
Yeah,
aware of that because
got
then
it.
it'll light a fire under me. Be like, we got to make a call on this one right away, or else somebody else is gonna snap it up.
Yes, that often is actually a good reason to do it. And would you, how quickly would you be comfortable with someone following up to make sure you didn't miss the pitch, in a day, in a few days?
I think a few days is good. I think typically, I think when I was doing freelancing, my rule was 3 days, and that usually feels fine. Some editors get kind of weird about this, but in my experience, most editors are understanding. We get a lot of pitches. We cannot respond to everything the same day or even the next day, and stuff does fall through the cracks. That definitely happens. So I don't resent anybody for following up, and I try. Hopefully, I get back to everybody within at least one follow up. I really do try to. So I think 3-ish days is a good rule, unless you've really got like this. I'm trying to cover an event; it's happening right now. Then I understand if you need to do maybe a 24-hour turnaround.
Right. And aside from words, right, which writers give you, are there other types of media that you would be open to that you have taken as pitches, whether it's photo, audio, illustrations?
Photos we've done before. We've accepted photos. Outside of that, at Sojourners, I have not. That's not. We have in-house designers for our illustration stuff, and we have a in-house audio team for when we need to do like podcast, social media type things. So that's not something that I need. But it's not unhelpful to know if you feel like there's a multimedia application to your piece. So if you want to make note of that, then if you have some really good photos, then we would definitely be open to including those. And that would probably obviously be a factor in the payment.
Great. Yeah, we always like to get paid a bump for the
Sure.
photos. Um, last question, and then I might even just give you another one, sort of summing it up.
Sure.
Is it okay to submit multiple story ideas in the same email, or would you rather just get them one at a time?
Personally, I prefer one at a time. That is a subject of debate even amongst our own team at Sojourners. So don't. This is just Tyler's world. Some people love like this person sent me 5 pitches and they're all really good. So let's all get together and play. Like I'm like 5 pitches. That's a lot. Like I got a lot going on right now. So I think one pitch is helpful for me, just because I can make the call right then, and I will try to say in the email even like feel free to pitch us anything else you got, and then if you have something else ready to go, send that one over too. But I think that I might be a little bit unique in that, so
Yeah.
I feel free to throw a few 3 or 4 in there. But I would say if you do that, you want to keep those pitches pretty short.
Yep.
You definitely. I don't want to. I don't think any editor is probably going to be excited about 5 3-paragraph pitches in
Right.
one email. That gets a little overwhelming.
And Tyler, this has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate how open you are. In some of the chats that I've had, especially with younger journalists in the climate we're in right now, they feel like, well, I can't really show my social justice cards, right? I have to sort of be more of a robot in terms of my social presence or the organizations I'm part of. I don't know if you have any advice for the younger, sort of newer generation of journalists who it's really a different climate than when I was coming into it, where it was sort of like, oh, lean into who you are.
Yeah, that's real. I would say that the fear around am I going to be either blackballed from the industry or worst case scenario targeted because of some of the things that I've written about or am passionate about and try to report on, is that going to be a liability in my work? I think unfortunately the answer is possibly right now, and we do need to be clear about that and mindful of that. And I don't say that to scare anybody or anything like that, but I do want us to be mindful. But I think, like I said earlier, that in my thinking is all the more cause to be courageous. And I think we should stay frosty out there. I don't want to give in to too much pessimism or gloom and doom around this industry, because I do think there is still a lot of exciting things happening in the world of journalism. And I see stories of heroic reporting and journalists that are very inspiring to me every day, including people on my own team who I find to be very inspiring. A few things that I would keep in mind if you're just starting out now is I would definitely take a lot of measures to protect yourself by getting a signal, by making sure that that you've got your stuff locked up pretty tight, that you know where it is and who has access to it. I think what I said earlier about social media is true, where I don't, it doesn't really bother me that people post some of their opinions online sometimes, especially if you're an opinion writer. But I think you need to probably be aware that that is going to be, for some organizations, a pretty important part of their vetting process for your piece. So it kind of depends on what sort of reporting and writing you want to do and who you want to work for, and that's a case by case basis on that front. But I would say for a journalist, it is important to be responsible about what you have out there, and it is part of being responsible to yourself is making sure that you're being safe, that you are being very strategic around where your privacy is and where your personal information is being stored and who has access to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm guessing you're going to get a lot of pitches after this
Oh, I can't
podcast
wait.
episode drops. I
That's great.
really appreciated talking to you, Tyler, and I especially love the focus on courage, because I do think that's what our world needs now, and certainly journalism needs now, and look forward to reading more about that in your pages.
Well, thank you so much. You can Huckabee@sojo.net is my email address, Huckabee, Huckabee@sojo.net. And if you can pitch me however you want, but if you want to throw the name of your podcast in the subject line, that'll help me know where you're coming from, and
Okay, awesome.
I'll
Yeah,
try to respond to it.
pitch from the IIJ Freelance Journalism
Yeah,
podcast. Awesome.
that'll be helpful. I'll be ready for it. And then depending on what the pitch is, I'm managing editor, so I may be sending it along to our opinion editor or culture editor or news editor or whatever. So I may or may not be the one you actually hear back from, but I'll try to make sure that your pitch goes to the right place.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing time with us today, and great to meet you, Tyler.
Thank you so much, Katherine. I appreciate it. I had a good time.
And thank you to everyone for joining us. Really appreciate you tuning in to the Freelance Journalism Podcast. The Freelance Journalism Podcast is a production of the Institute for Independent Journalists. Our mission is the emotional and financial sustainability of freelancers of color. Learn more about our work at theiij.com and use the code POD10 for a discount on our annual conference and other events open for registration now. That's POD number 10. And please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or both. You can find our free webinars and other offerings on YouTube. And your recommendation and sharing with friends is the greatest compliment and helps us discover new listeners. Thanks for listening.